The summer air in the conservatory was heavy and still, thick with the scent of lilies and the oppressive weight of Reese's manufactured ambition. To me, Victoria, this bridal shower felt less like a joyful family gathering and more like a final, polished exhibition of everything that had come between me and my daughter, Serafina. Every detail, from the impossibly tall crystal flutes to the aggressive geometric precision of the ice sculpture, was a glaring symbol of the new, ruthless world Reese had convinced Sarah was her rightful domain. At 68, I felt less like a cherished mother of the bride and more like an inconvenient ghost. My late husband, Robert, had only been gone for 18 months, and the quiet, crushing grief still sat like a stone in my chest, a presence I had learned to manage but could never truly hide. In Reese's world of sharp edges and quick turns, vulnerability was not tolerated. If you're still here, welcome to Voice of Jenna, a place where stories aren't just told, they're felt. Here, we dive into real emotions, family drama, quiet heartbreaks, unexpected twists, and the moments that change us. So sit back, relax, and let me tell you what happened next. I watched Sarah across the room, her face radiant, oblivious to the emotional price tag of this glamour. She was blinded by the promise of status, completely convinced that Reese's vision of their future, complete with a penthouse, a membership at the yacht club, and a network of elite contacts, was the only definition of happiness. It hurt to see her so happy in a cage of someone else's design. My own suit, well-made but a decade old, felt like a deliberate act of quiet defiance against the parade of fashion-forward young wives who surrounded me. I was the financial architect of the family's wealth, having spent 40 years as Robert's silent partner, managing portfolios, property titles, and tax strategies with a meticulous competence that made our fortune secure. Yet, in Reese's eyes, this invisible labor meant nothing. I was retired, a widow, and therefore irrelevant. Reese, sensing I was momentarily alone, moved in with predatory speed. He didn't approach, he loomed. He held his champagne flute like a weapon, his smile brittle and perfectly rehearsed. "Victoria," he began, his voice dropping immediately into that low, confidential tone he reserved for delivering bad news to junior staff. "I need to talk to you about the wedding, and I need you to understand that this is purely logistical. We're both mature adults. I expect you can handle this rationally." The implication was clear. Any emotional reaction would be seen as a failure of maturity. He steered me toward the corner near the massive French doors, away from the glittering crowd, and the sound of the party faded to a dull, distant hum. I stood there, bracing myself, my heart aching with the realization that the man marrying my daughter was about to launch a tactical strike against me. "The wedding isn't just a ceremony, Victoria. It's a high-stakes corporate merger," he announced, his gaze sweeping the room, checking the optics even in private. "My career depends on the impression we make. My senior partners, my clients, they're all attending, and they judge a man by the perceived value and stability of his network. The image of the new family must be flawless." He paused, deliberately drawing out the moment, making me wait for the inevitable blow. I watched him, and the grief over Robert began to recede, replaced by a familiar, ice-cold strategic anger. This was no longer a personal slight. This was a negotiation with a hostile counterparty. "And you, Victoria, are the greatest risk to that flawless image," he stated, his voice devoid of any human empathy, cold and precise like a spreadsheet entry. "You simply don't fit. Your quiet demeanor, your dated clothing, your very presence projects an image of being, well, old and obsolete. You remind everyone of the past, of money that is settled, not aggressive. In our world, you have no social utility. You are retired. You are, forgive me, irrelevant." The word irrelevant was the knife twist. It was a complete dismissal of my identity, a brutal erasure of the 40 years I spent managing the family's assets, the foundation upon which his entire future with Sarah rested. The pain was physical, a sharp, suffocating gasp in my chest, a profound recognition that I was being cast aside not just as a mother, but as a competent human being whose utility had expired. Reese, completely blind to the damage he had inflicted, pressed his advantage, convinced he had achieved the desired emotional capitulation. I know how fiercely you love Sarah. You've always been extremely generous. So, I have a request, a necessary, significant gesture that would secure her happiness more than any monetary gift. He leaned in, his voice sickeningly soft. The greatest gift you could give Sarah and me for our wedding is if you simply disappear from our family. He then laid out the full terms of my banishment with chilling specificity. Don't attend the wedding or the rehearsal dinner. Don't call or email for at least 6 months. Book an extended cruise. Go anywhere, just vanish from the social radar. We need the time to establish our new, elite network without the awkwardness of having to introduce a mother who reminds everyone of the past. If you agree to this, Victoria, I promise I will ensure Sarah is completely financially secure forever. He was offering a bribe, Sarah's future security, in exchange for my complete emotional exile. This revealed his true motive. He was not concerned with my social standing, but with my financial standing, specifically my legal role as the sole trustee of the Villa Trust. The Villa, our historic and immensely valuable property in the south of France, was the single largest family asset. The legal structure was complex, and the final transfer to Sarah was mandated to occur exactly 1 month after the wedding, contingent upon my final signature. Reese needed that signature to unlock the property's immense value, but he dreaded my presence because he feared my financial acumen and my intimate knowledge of the trust's protective clauses. He feared I would see his plan to leverage the property and immediately drain its hidden, multi-million-dollar cash reserve. The anger hardened into a cold resolve, erasing the last vestiges of my pain. I was done being the victim. I was done being the invisible architect. I looked him dead in the eye, replacing the quiet grief with the steely focus of the corporate strategist. Reese, I said, my voice barely audible, yet carrying the weight of 4 decades of managed wealth. I hear you. You have made a proposal, articulating your demand for my absolute absence in exchange for your promise of Sarah's future security and, of course, the uncontested transfer of the Villa Trust. He nodded, a flash of pure, smug triumph in his eyes. Precisely, Victoria. I knew you'd see the logic. I see the logic, I confirmed, a small, cold smile touching my lips, the smile of a negotiator who has just realized the opposing party is sitting on a massive, undisclosed liability. If you believe my disappearance is the greatest gift, then I will ensure that is exactly what you receive. Your wish, Reese, is my command. I set my untouched champagne glass down gently on the nearest tray. I didn't argue, I didn't cry, and I didn't warn him. I simply accepted the banishment and walked away, leaving him to revel in his perceived victory. He thought he had banished an emotional old woman. He had no idea he had just activated the most meticulous, financially devastating counter-strategy of my career. The countdown to the wedding and the creation of a massive, strategic vacuum had begun. The ride from the lakeside club to my hidden apartment was silent and cold, matching the mood I had cultivated the moment Reese delivered his monstrous request. I bypassed the driver's question about heading home, giving him the address of my small, private bolt hole in the financial district, a functional, anonymous space I had maintained for years for intense, focused work on my corporate portfolios. It was a sterile, secure environment, completely devoid of the sentimental trappings of the family home, and therefore, the perfect command center for the strategic operation I was about to initiate. I was not retreating. I was launching a full-scale tactical withdrawal to my prepared base. As soon as the heavy, secure door locked behind me, I went to the hidden safe, concealed expertly behind a fake air vent, and retrieved my old, encrypted corporate laptop. Reese thought I was emotionally shattered, booking a luxury cruise to disappear. He thought I was running away from the pain of his rejection, sacrificing my self-respect for the fragile promise of Sarah's happiness. He was fatally wrong. My quiet composure was not born of grief. It was the cold stillness of a strategist who has just identified the enemy's single, critical weakness. The insult of being called irrelevant had not broken me. It had freed me, cutting the last emotional anchor to my role as the enabling mother. Now, I was strictly the financial planner protecting her primary long-term asset. I poured a glass of water, allowing myself only a single minute to feel the searing betrayal, then wiped the emotion clean. I pulled up the intricate legal structure of the Villa Trust on my large, auxiliary monitors. The villa was the linchpin. Reese was focused entirely on its immense public, declared value, the historic French real estate. But Robert and I, the architects, knew the villa property was merely the beautiful casing. The true, crucial prize was the liquidity rider and the vast, hidden cash reserve managed under the trust's umbrella, a multi-million-dollar portfolio of high-yield international bonds and a seven-figure liquidity reserve intended for the property's restoration and Sarah's ultimate generational security. Reese was a short-sighted banker. He saw the wedding as the key to unlocking the villa's public value, which he intended to immediately leverage, and then drain the private cash reserve for his own ambitious, high-risk schemes. He wanted the fast money, and he needed me gone because I was the only person who understood the structure well enough to stop him. My first strategic move was swift, precise, and completely untraceable. I needed to separate the liquid assets from the fixed asset, the house, before the trust transfer became irrevocable. I opened secure, encrypted communication lines to my private asset managers in Geneva and London, contacts who knew my professional reputation and acted without question. Over the course of the evening, working with the practiced efficiency of a central bank manager executing a hostile capital flight, I systematically initiated the transfer of the entire liquidity reserve and the accompanying high-value art collection. The funds were converted from various currencies into a single, untraceable long-term treasury instrument, and the art was securely moved into an anonymous, climate-controlled vault, entirely outside the trust's public jurisdiction. Reese would receive the deed to the beautiful, historic villa property 1 month after the wedding, exactly as planned. But the immense, valuable cash reserve he was relying on to fuel his career, the true financial engine of the asset, would be completely, legally, and permanently gone before his pen ever touched the final papers. I had made the house a fortress, but I had removed the treasure from the chest. As the sun began to paint the glass towers of the financial district in a harsh, calculating light, I received the email that both confirmed my strategy and pierced my heart. Sarah's message. Mom, Reese said you two had a really wonderful, mature talk. He's so happy you agreed to take that cruise and disappear for a while. It means so much to us. We'll call you when you get back, okay? Love you. The text was a double-edged sword. Her happiness proved how completely Reese had manipulated her, convincing her that her own mother's banishment was a loving, necessary sacrifice for her future. Her innocent approval solidified my resolve. My task was no longer just about the money. It was about shattering the poisonous illusion Reese had wrapped around my daughter, protecting her real long-term stability from his short-term greed. I replied simply, I am well, darling. I have been very busy preparing the final details of your great gift. It is a work of precision. I will see you soon. All my love. The message was truthful, opaque, and entirely focused on the future. My next and most crucial step was to engage Mr. Thompson, our longtime estate lawyer and a professional I trusted implicitly. He understood the complexities of the Vance fortune and respected my role as its quiet steward. I called him on a secure line, conveying the gravity of the situation without needing to raise my voice. Mr. Thompson, it's Victoria. I need you to initiate the legal process for a full, absolute transfer of the Villa Trust to Serafina Vance and Reese Sterling, effective 1 month after the wedding, as originally stipulated. Understood, Victoria, he replied, a hint of caution in his tone. But I need to confirm the final terms of the liquidity rider. Are you transferring the cash reserve and art collection along with the real estate deed? I leaned forward, my gaze fixed on the screen showing the final transfer documents, awaiting my digital signature. No, Mr. Thompson. I am exercising the trustee's right under Article 4, Section 3, Relocation for Preservation and Security. I am instructing you to draft and execute an amendment of condition. This amendment will irrevocably state that the entire trust's internal liquidity reserve and all high-value movables are to be placed into a newly created financial instrument, the Serafina Vance Foundation for Financial Security. A foundation, Victoria? Mr. Thompson's surprise was evident. That is a significant, decisive legal maneuver. It essentially ring-fences the entire cash asset from the marital estate and makes the principal inaccessible to Reese. Precisely, I confirmed. Reese wanted me to disappear. I am disappearing the asset he cares most about. The Foundation's charter must state that the principal cannot be borrowed against, cashed out, or used as collateral. It is to provide low-yield, steady, tax-advantaged income solely for Serafina's generational security. He wanted the greatest gift. I am giving him an empty box. I need those documents finalized and locked away until the wedding is complete. The deed to the villa goes to them. The cash goes to the foundation. Mr. Thompson, recognizing the strategic brilliance and the ethical imperative of the maneuver, agreed to proceed immediately. I spent the remainder of the day ensuring the foundation's charter was impregnable, a testament to my decades of financial foresight. Reese was walking toward the altar, convinced he was acquiring a multi-million-dollar cash prize and banishing his primary financial impediment. He was so busy celebrating my forced absence that he didn't realize the quiet old woman he dismissed had just legally replaced his anticipated fortune with a ghost of an asset. The countdown to the wedding and the subsequent revelation of my strategic vacuum had officially begun. I had vanished, and the real consequences of that disappearance were about to ripple through their entire future. The final days leading up to the wedding were a study in observed chaos versus controlled action. I, Victoria, remained physically absent, adhering perfectly to Reese's cruel command. The official story, the educational philanthropy cruise, had been expertly circulated by Serafina, who was still tragically happy and completely convinced that my disappearance was a necessary act of familial love. I watched the spectacle unfold on my secondary monitors, tracking the meticulously curated public image Reese was projecting. There were the black-tie galas, the professional-grade engagement photos, and the constant stream of social media posts showcasing their aggressive, beautiful success. Reese was the conductor of this status symphony, and the high-pitched anxiety radiating from him, even through the digital static, was palpable. Reese was a meticulous planner, and my silent compliance had terrified him. He knew I was the most competent financial mind in his new family, and my failure to argue, cry, or threaten meant one thing to a man like him. I had a counter-strategy. He was operating under the profound anxiety that I had inserted a hidden poison pill into the transfer documents. He just couldn't locate it. He was obsessed with the optics and the transfer date of the villa property, and he completely ignored the one thing a true strategist protects, the liquidity. I confirmed his panic when, 2 days before the wedding, my system's secure firewall registered a massive, targeted wave of probing inquiries. Reese was desperately attempting to access non-public information about the Villa Trust through a sophisticated but ultimately amateurish chain of private proxies and offshore shell company inquiries. He was trying to confirm that the multi-million-dollar cash reserve was still legally attached to the real estate, ready to be immediately leveraged the moment he and Sarah signed the final marital agreement. His searches confirmed only the public valuation of the real estate and the scheduled transfer date. Everything, to a superficial glance, was on track. He was searching for a landmine on the surface when I had already airlifted the treasure from the vault beneath. Meanwhile, Sarah's communication was the only thing that threatened to break my resolve. I received a heartbroken message. "Mom, I truly hate that you're not here for the final rehearsal dinner. Reese says it's essential for his career contacts, but it feels so empty. Are you really having fun? It just feels wrong without you. I miss you." This text was the most profound source of pain and the most potent fuel for my mission. Sarah was suffering the loss of her mother, yet she was desperately rationalizing it, accepting Reese's narrative that my emotional exile was a necessary, loving sacrifice for her future happiness. It confirmed how deeply Reese's manipulative control had taken root. I replied, maintaining the strategic wall I had built. "My darling, Everything is proceeding beautifully. The great gift is being perfected with every passing hour. I will see you when the work is done. All my love. The message was true. The great gift was the foundation's security, but perfectly cryptic, ensuring Reese's narrative remained intact until the decisive moment. The day before the wedding, I initiated the final legal action with Mr. Thompson. He came to my command center, a small briefcase containing the foundation's final charter and the deeds of irrevocability. We sat at the steel desk, surrounded by the glow of the financial monitors. "Victoria, I must reiterate," Mr. Thompson said, his voice respectful, "this foundation charter is a masterpiece of asset protection. It is a financial fortress. Reese will receive the villa deed as promised, but the entire liquid asset, the $7 million he is counting on, is legally severed from the marital estate forever. He can never borrow against it, liquidate it, or touch the principal." "That is the point, Mr. Thompson," I confirmed, signing the deed that formally and irrevocably locked the cash reserve into the Serafina Vance Foundation for financial security. He demanded my absence. I am delivering it by making the asset he desires absent from his future. He wanted to acquire a high-value, liquid asset to fuel his aggressive career schemes. He is acquiring a high-value, a liquid maintenance liability. We finalized the delivery protocol, the final, non-negotiable term of my disappearance. I would not attend the wedding, honoring Reese's demand. The moment the ceremony was completed and the marriage legally recognized, Mr. Thompson would deliver two things: the key to the villa, the property deed, and a single, sealed envelope containing the amendment of condition and the foundation's irrevocable charter. This second document would reveal that the asset Reese truly craved was legally gone. That night, I didn't sleep. Instead, I monitored the financial media. Reese's firm was scheduled to announce a massive, leveraged merger deal the day after his honeymoon, a deal that would require significant personal capital from its partners. It was clear now, Reese wasn't just planning a lavish lifestyle. He was planning to use the Villa Trust's hidden cash reserve as his required capital injection into the deal, securing his promotion and his power within the firm. My strategic removal of that cash wasn't just a loss of money, it was a detonation of his career trajectory. Without that seven-figure liquid injection, his leveraged deal would collapse, destroying his reputation and his carefully constructed network of prestige. As the morning of the wedding dawned, I dressed in a simple, elegant ivory suit, the suit I would have worn to the wedding had I not been banished. I went not to the church, but to the Villa Trust's headquarters, a nondescript legal building miles away. I stood in the lobby, watched the clock tick down, and performed my most profound symbolic act of separation. I logged into the Trust's main server one last time. I didn't change anything. Instead, I executed a final audit log print. This log contained every single inquiry Reese had made into the Trust's documents over the last week. The panic, the desperation, the attempts to find the cash. I printed the dozens of pages, bound them simply, and placed the document into a large, unmarked manila envelope. This envelope was not for Reese. It was for Serafina. It would be delivered by private courier to her apartment 1 month after the wedding, precisely when she and Reese were scheduled to officially receive the villa deed. This document would serve as the incontrovertible, non-emotional evidence of Reese's true motivations and his hidden financial aggression. It was the truth of his character, delivered too late to stop the marriage, but perfectly timed to shatter the illusion of her future. The clock struck noon. The wedding was over. The marriage was legally recognized. Reese had his new wife and the deed to a beautiful, expensive, and illiquid house. He thought he had won. Victoria, the quiet, irrelevant mother, was ready for the moment the silence of my absence finally delivered the truth. The vacuum was complete. The period immediately following the wedding was defined by two opposing realities: Reese's public triumph and my controlled, silent anticipation. Victoria, maintained my complete physical disappearance. I was still officially on a philanthropic cruise, enjoying excellent cell service only when necessary to execute a wire transfer. I focused on managing the Serafina Vance Foundation's initial investment, ensuring the newly acquired long-term treasury instruments were locked down and generating the steady, modest yield I designed for my daughter's future security, far removed from Reese's predatory financial landscape. Reese, meanwhile, was experiencing his imagined glory. The wedding was heralded in the social and financial columns as the union of two rising powers, the old money stability of the Vances, represented by the magnificent villa deed, meeting the aggressive, forward-thinking capital of Reese Sterling. He and Serafina jetted off on a lavish 2-week honeymoon, completely convinced they had successfully eliminated their primary domestic liability, me, and secured their key financial asset, the villa. But beneath the surface of the perfect honeymoon photos, the anxiety I had detected in Reese intensified. He was a man who needed control and confirmation, and my easy compliance had left a phantom limb of fear. He was anticipating the official transfer of the Villa Trust's assets, the real estate deed plus the massive liquid cash reserve, in 1 month, but he couldn't shake the dread that I had hidden a trap. He repeatedly called Mr. Thompson's office, using Serafina's name to ask vague questions about the completeness of the asset package. Mr. Thompson, bound by the confidentiality of the trust's new structure, could only confirm that the property transfer was on schedule and legally sound. This was true. The physical villa deed was secure. The true climax, the moment of revelation, was engineered to coincide with the end of their honeymoon and the immediate return to Reese's highly leveraged business deal. This was the moment I had anticipated since the conservatory. The day after Reese and Sarah landed, Mr. Thompson executed the delivery protocol. He summoned Reese to his office under the guise of finalizing the villa deed transfer. Reese arrived alone, eager and impatient, ready to sign the final paperwork and officially claim the family asset. Mr. Thompson, a man of profound integrity and dry professional demeanor, guided Reese through the process. The deed to the physical villa property was signed, sealed, and legally transferred. Reese's smug relief was palpable. He had done it. He had navigated the widow and secured the prize. "Congratulations, Mr. Sterling," Mr. Thompson said, pushing the signed deed across the polished mahogany desk. "The villa is legally yours and Serafina's. However, there are 2 final documents related to the trust's dissolution that Victoria insisted be delivered at the time of transfer." Reese's smile tightened, confirming my prediction. He was expecting a small, final restriction, a minor annoyance. He reached for the heavy manila envelope Mr. Thompson placed before him. "The first document is the Villa Trust Maintenance and Liquidity Amendment," Mr. Thompson stated formally, ensuring a witness, a junior associate, was present for the entire transaction. "It details the final disposition of the trust's auxiliary assets." Reese tore open the envelope, his fingers fumbling in his haste. He glanced at the first page, his eyes scanning for dollar figures and account numbers. He saw the legal language about the transfer of the villa property, and then his gaze snagged on a single, devastating paragraph under a bold heading: "Reclassification and Transfer of Internal Liquidity Reserve." The paragraph stated, in cold, precise legal terms, that pursuant to the trustee's authority under Article 4, Section 3, and to ensure the long-term, non-liquid generational security of Serafina Vance, the entire cash reserve, the bond portfolio, and all movables, including the art collection, had been converted into an irrevocable, non-transferable financial instrument, the Serafina Vance Foundation for Financial Security. The language was dense, but the meaning was brutally clear. The $7 million in liquid capital Reese was counting on, the money he needed as collateral for his massive, leveraged merger deal, was legally gone. It was ring-fenced, untouchable, and irrevocably dedicated to providing a small, steady income for Sarah decades down the line. It was no longer a liquid asset. It was a permanent, non-leverageable endowment. The color drained from Reese's face. His composure, the armor he never removed, cracked. He didn't rage immediately. He dissolved into a state of shocked, silent confusion. He reread the paragraph, then flipped through the Foundation's charter, searching for a loophole, a sign of forgery, anything to deny the reality. His high-stakes, ambitious financial world was collapsing around him with the reading of a single, well-drafted legal document. This is impossible," he stammered, his voice thin, losing the aggressive projection he relied on. "The cash reserve was part of the valuation. This is a fraudulent transfer. It was supposed to be available for leveraging. It was available only at the discretion of the trustee for the stated purpose of the trust, Mr. Sterling," Mr. Thompson replied calmly. "Mrs. Vance, as the sole trustee, exercised her right to ensure the long-term preservation of the assets, legally protecting them from all outside claims, including the marital estate. The foundation is irrevocable. The money is not available to you." Reese then exploded. The eruption was a terrifying mix of fury and fear, the true magnitude of the disaster finally sinking in. "She did this because I asked her to leave. That old woman. She knew. She planned this. This is spite. This is financial terrorism. The Foundation's purpose is clearly stated: the generational financial security of Serafina Vance." Mr. Thompson corrected him sharply, maintaining the professional distance. "It is entirely legal. And you still have the villa deed. You have the property, Mr. Sterling. You simply do not have the liquidity." Then came the final cruel twist, the second envelope. "And finally, the second document," Mr. Thompson said, pushing a smaller, sealed envelope across the desk. "This one is personally addressed to Serafina Vance. Victoria asked that you deliver it directly to her without opening it." Reese snatched the envelope, his hands visibly shaking. He knew this was the final dagger, the emotional retribution. He stared at the plain white paper, his mind racing, unable to process the total strategic annihilation delivered by the woman he dismissed as irrelevant. He had lost the multi-million-dollar cash injection he needed to fund his crucial merger deal, and now he was left with an illiquid, high-maintenance European estate, an embarrassment he couldn't afford to keep and couldn't quickly sell without revealing the financial hole I had created. I knew he wouldn't deliver that second letter to Sarah immediately. The humiliation of the financial reversal would be too great to reveal his own role in my banishment. He would hide the truth, desperately trying to scramble for replacement capital and salvage his deal, which was scheduled to be announced the next day. The pressure on him was now astronomical. My silence had created a vacuum of $7 million, and now, my daughter's happiness was directly contingent on how long Reese could hide his utter financial ruin from her. The real explosion was only just beginning. Reese's life immediately devolved into a desperate, silent scramble. The moment he stormed out of Mr. Thompson's office, clutching the villa deed and the two sealed envelopes, the reality of my strategic countermove hit him like a physical blow. He was a man who had staked his entire future, his career promotion, his reputation with his senior partners, and his aggressively successful persona on the immediate, liquid acquisition of the trust's cash reserve. That $7 million was the required collateral for his participation in the firm's massive, highly leveraged merger deal, scheduled for public announcement the very next day. Without that capital injection, his position in the deal was null and void. His failure to secure the funds would expose him not just as financially incompetent, but as a man who had grossly misrepresented his assets to his most powerful colleagues. The embarrassment would be immediate and career-ending. The illiquid villa, which he couldn't afford to maintain and couldn't sell quickly without a fire sale discount, was now a public, tangible monument to his catastrophic failure. His primary focus became containment and emergency replacement. He didn't dare tell Serafina the truth, that his mother, the woman he had banished, had just performed a financial vasectomy on his entire fortune. He knew that revealing my strategic brilliance would instantly reveal his own cruelty in demanding my absence, shattering the illusion of the selfless sacrifice he had sold Sarah. So he buried the documents. The villa deed was presented to Sarah that evening with great fanfare, celebrated as the crown jewel of their new life. The amendment of condition and the foundation charter, the true papers of separation, were locked away in his private, secured home safe, hidden from his new wife. He also hid the small, sealed envelope addressed directly to Sarah, the one I had insisted he deliver. He couldn't risk the emotional payload of that letter reaching her before he had stabilized his financial disaster. Reese spent the next 48 hours in a frenetic, secret panic, cycling through a series of increasingly desperate phone calls. He tried leveraging the villa's public real estate value, but the lending timeline was too long, and the true cost of maintaining the historic property made lenders cautious. He called every wealthy contact, attempting to find a short-term, high-interest bridge loan. The rejection was universal. Nobody throws $7 million into a deal at the last minute for a man who suddenly looks unstable. His reputation, built on an impeccable image of control, was unraveling in the dark. Meanwhile, I, Victoria, was watching. I had instructed my private financial surveillance to monitor specific public filings and news feeds related to Reese's firm and the merger announcement. I also paid close attention to the movements within the offshore shell companies Reese had used for his panicked inquiries into the trust. I noted a flurry of activity, indicating he was trying to liquidate his personal assets, his sports cars, his art collection, anything he could convert to cash to plug the gaping hole I had created. He was consuming his own body to survive the starvation I had inflicted. The critical moment arrived the day the merger deal was supposed to be announced. Instead of the triumphant press release, there was a quiet, clinical announcement. Firm partner Reese Sterling withdrawing from planned merger. The statement cited personal capital constraints and an unexpected shift in asset liquidity. The language was professional, but in the cutthroat world of corporate finance, it was a death knell. A withdrawal at this stage, on the day of the announcement, meant catastrophic failure. He hadn't just lost the money. He had lost face, trust, and his standing with the firm's most influential figures. The silence was louder than any screaming headline. That evening, Reese came home to Serafina after a brutal, humiliating day of meetings where he had to lie, apologize, and accept the subtle, freezing dismissal of his partners. He was emotionally and professionally gutted. Sarah, who had been glowing with pride all day, ready to celebrate his triumph, was utterly confused. "Reese, what is unexpected capital constraint?" she asked, putting her arm around him as he slumped onto their expensive leather sofa. "What happened to the merger? I thought you said this was your big moment." Reese, exhausted and utterly defeated, resorted to the only defense mechanism he had left, attacking the source of his misery, me. "It's your mother," he hissed, standing up abruptly. "That irrelevant old woman. She did this. She sabotaged me." Sarah recoiled, shocked by the sudden venom. "What are you talking about? She's on a cruise. She gave us the villa, Reese. It was her great gift." "The villa is a beautiful, empty shell," he spat out, his control dissolving completely. "The entire cash reserve, the $7 million, the money I needed for the merger, she ring-fenced it. She signed a ridiculous charter for a foundation in your name and made the principal untouchable. She left us with a high-maintenance liability and no liquidity." Sarah's face went pale. The word foundation was a ghost of generosity. She still didn't understand the complex financial maneuver, but she understood the emotional betrayal in Reese's tone and the sheer magnitude of the word, $7 million. "A foundation for me?" she whispered, confusion overriding her shock. "Why would she do that? Why wouldn't she tell us?" "Because she's manipulative," Reese shouted, the veneer of the confident banker completely gone, replaced by a desperate, ruined man. "She wanted revenge. She did this because I asked her to leave. Because I told her that her presence was an embarrassment to our future. This was her spite, her passive-aggressive revenge." This was the pivotal moment. The truth of Reese's cruelty, delivered by Reese himself, under the extreme pressure of his professional ruin. He had just confessed to his wife that he had demanded her mother's banishment, and that his failure was a direct result of that demand. Serafina was not only confronted with a complex financial betrayal but with the horrifying, undeniable truth of her husband's character and his transactional view of her family. Sarah stepped back, her eyes wide with a combination of financial incomprehension and crushing personal realization. "You asked her to disappear? Reese, what are you talking about? That's what you meant by taking a cruise for our future? You told her to go away?" Reese realized too late that he had just confessed his crime. He tried to backtrack, to justify, but the words tumbled out incoherently. The damage was done. My disappearance had achieved its first and most crucial goal. Serafina was now aware that her husband was a callous manipulator and that her mother's gift was not a cruise, but an act of strategic self-preservation and protection. The stage was set for the deepest emotional crisis of their short marriage. The velvet silence of their expensive apartment, usually a comforting sign of their insulated status, became an echo chamber for Serafina's rising panic. Rhys's explosive confession, the brutal, ruined admission that he had demanded her mother disappear from their lives, had cracked the perfect facade of her marriage. She stood frozen, not because of the lost $7 million, a sum she couldn't fully conceptualize, but because of the single, devastating truth. Her husband had traded her mother for a business opportunity. "Say that again, Rhys," Sarah whispered, her voice tight with disbelief. She hadn't heard the aggressive, confident banker she married. She had heard a desperate, frightened boy who had just thrown his financial security into a bonfire and was now blaming the only person who had ever truly protected her. Rhys, having spent his last reserves of composure in his outburst, now tried to retreat, his voice dropping into a manipulative coo. "Sarah, darling, listen to me. It wasn't a demand. It was a suggestion, a logistical request. She was grieving, she was fragile. I just explained that for my promotion, for our future, the optics needed to be streamlined. She was happy to go. She saw the bigger picture." "Happy to go?" Sarah choked out a laugh that was pure agony. "She hasn't missed a single birthday, a single holiday, my entire life. She was forced to invent a ridiculous cruise and lie to me because you told her she was an embarrassment." The word, which Rhys had confessed with professional cruelty, now hung heavy in the air, a stain on their pristine apartment. Sarah finally understood the sickening depth of his transactional view of the world. She realized that everything Rhys valued was an asset, and I, her mother, had been deemed a worthless liability. The argument escalated rapidly, moving from the specific financial betrayal to the fundamental dishonesty of their relationship. Sarah accused him of marrying her for the acquisition of the villa, and Rhys, cornered and financially broken, attacked her dependency. "I married you because you were the package." Rhys raged, pacing the room, his expensive silk tie askew. "You came with status, you came with potential assets. But your mother's meddling has ruined everything. Do you know what unexpected capital constraint means? It means I am out. I am humiliated. And it is your family's fault for structuring the trust like a peasant's annuity fund." "The foundation is for my financial security," Sarah argued, clutching at the only fact she had. "It says so right there." "It's a cage," he yelled. "It's $7 million sitting idle, generating less interest than a savings account, while I could have turned it into $20 million. She didn't protect you. She shackled you. She ensured you would never outgrow her control." His accusation that I was manipulating her from afar hit too close to home. Sarah had always felt smothered by my love, which had indeed manifested as protective enabling. But hearing Rhys use that vulnerability to justify his malice was the final straw. She saw the true dynamic. Rhys didn't want to free her. He wanted to control her, and he viewed her safety net as an obstacle to his personal leveraging. The shock gave way to a cold, necessary clarity. Sarah needed to know the full truth of the foundation. Where were the documents? She had only seen the deed to the physical villa property. "Show me the foundation papers, Rhys," she demanded, standing tall, an echo of my own strategic resolve hardening her posture. "I need to see the charter. I need to understand what my mother actually did." Rhys immediately went on the defensive, his face twisting into a mask of fear. "I filed them. They are secure. Why do you suddenly trust her? She lied to you. For 6 months. She's the one who created this instability." Sarah's eyes didn't waver. "She lied to obey your order. You lied to marry me. Now, show me the papers." Rhys refused, claiming he had already sent them to his legal team for review. A desperate, clumsy lie. He knew that if Sarah read the Foundation's charter, she would see the legal language that definitively proved the asset was protected from divorce claims and was solely for her long-term security. She would see, unequivocally, that I had acted as a mother protecting her child from a predator, not as a woman seeking revenge. That night, Sarah moved out of their master bedroom. The crisis was too profound, the betrayal too sickening, to continue the illusion of the perfect marriage. Once Reese fell into an exhausted, defeated sleep, Sarah acted. She knew Reese had a small, private safe in his study, hidden behind a framed photo of his investment firm's logo. It was a lockbox for sensitive, non-public documents. She crept into the study, her hands shaking, and managed to access the safe using the combination she had seen him input months ago, a random sequence she had stored in her memory, thinking it was a quirk of his, not a warning sign. Inside the safe, she found the two documents, the multi-page, dry amendment of condition and the Foundation charter that confirmed my strategic move. Her eyes scanned the legal terms, confirming Reese's confession. The cash was gone, placed into an irreversible trust for her. It was not revenge. It was an airtight, financial hug. But nestled beneath the Foundation documents, she found something else, something small and profoundly disturbing. The second, sealed envelope, addressed in my familiar, elegant script, simply to Serafina Vance. Reese had gone to elaborate lengths to hide the financial documents that proved his lie, but he had also meticulously hidden this small, personal letter.
Why?
Because the financial ruin was a consequence, but this letter was the direct emotional confrontation he feared. He hadn't wanted Sarah to read my words, knowing that whatever I wrote would cement her perspective against him. Sarah tore the envelope open, her hands shaking. There were no complex legal terms inside, no financial statements. Just a single, heavy sheet of stationery, filled with my familiar handwriting. It wasn't a vindictive letter. It was a deeply personal message from a mother to her daughter, a bridge built over the chasm Reese had created. The letter began, "My dearest Sarah, if you are reading this, it means two things are true. First, you are now legally married, and I pray your wedding was the beautiful, flawless day you deserved. Second, it means Reese has suffered an immense financial setback related to the Villa Trust's cash reserve, and that he has, under pressure, confessed to the horrific condition he placed upon me, that I was to disappear from your life to secure your future. I write this not to wound you, but to protect you, because now you are vulnerable. The greatest mistake Reese made was demanding my absence. That absence did not leave a vacuum of grief. It created a vacuum of competence. I used that vacuum to perform my final act of stewardship, securing your long-term, non-negotiable stability, far from the reach of the short-term, high-risk schemes Reese lives by. The Foundation is not a cage, darling. It is a lifeboat. It is insurance against failure. You will see the truth now, not in what I say, but in how he reacts to losing the money. He will blame me. He will accuse me of revenge. If he had loved you, he would have celebrated the protection I gave you. Since he only valued the liquidity, he is now destroyed by its loss." The letter continued, explaining the full extent of my financial maneuvers and concluding with a deeply emotional plea for her to trust her own judgment and find the courage to confront the total wreckage of her marriage. Sarah finished reading, the paper shaking violently in her hands. She finally saw the whole, agonizing picture. Reese had not married her. He had attempted to acquire her assets, and when I refused to be a liability, I used my forced absence to create an unassailable protection. She looked at the sealed safe, the stolen documents, and the broken man sleeping down the hall. My quiet disappearance was not an act of surrender. It was an act of profound, strategic love. The time for blind obedience was over. The time for truth, and for the final, excruciating decision, was now. She knew she had to find her mother. The morning after discovering the hidden documents and reading my letter, Serafina moved with a quiet, decisive efficiency I hadn't seen in her since she was a teenager, before Reese had taught her the superficial value of languid entitlement. She left the Foundation charter spread open on Reese's study desk, next to the framed logo that hid his safe, and placed my sealed, personal letter directly on his pillow. She didn't confront him. She didn't scream or accuse. She simply walked out of their apartment, taking only a single suitcase, a small, functional piece of luggage, completely unlike the designer bags Reese had encouraged her to buy. She left behind the diamonds, the designer clothing, and the entire shimmering facade of the life he had built for her. Sarah's first stop was Mr. Thompson's office. She needed verification, not of the law, but of the heart. Mr. Thompson, seeing the steely resolve in her eyes, a look that reminded him vividly of me, Victoria, during the most ruthless corporate negotiations, knew immediately that the reckoning had arrived. He ushered her into his private office, ensuring complete confidentiality. "Sarah," he began, his voice sympathetic. "I assume you have seen the Foundation Charter." "I have," she confirmed, pulling out a chair and sitting down with the posture of a client, not a distressed daughter. "I need you to confirm 3 things, Mr. Thompson. First, did my mother make this amendment of condition after Reese demanded her absence?" "Yes," Mr. Thompson confirmed, nodding sadly. "She called me the evening of the bridal shower, immediately after leaving the Lakeside Club. Her instructions were precise. Finalize the foundation before the wedding, making the cash reserve legally inaccessible to the marital estate. She told me to tell Reese that his wish was her command." Sarah closed her eyes briefly, absorbing the depth of that calculated betrayal. Reese's confession was true. I hadn't been on a pleasant cruise. I had been executing a defense strategy. "Second," Sarah continued, her voice low, "if Reese were to file for divorce now, today, would the principal of the Serafina Vance Foundation be protected?" "Absolutely," Mr. Thompson stated firmly. "The Foundation's charter makes the principal an irrevocable, separate asset for your generational security. Reese cannot touch it. It is protected from him, from his debt, and from any future claim he might make against the marital estate. Your mother created an impregnable fortress for your future." "And third," Sarah asked, her eyes searching his face, looking for the last shred of objective truth. "Did Reese, as he claimed, try to dismantle the foundation or challenge the transfer the moment he received the papers?" Mr. Sterling's reaction was extreme, Sarah, the lawyer admitted. He demanded to know how to immediately access the capital, claiming the transfer was fraudulent because he needed the cash for an immediate business transaction, the merger deal. He showed zero interest in the villa as a legacy asset, only in the liquidity. He was only concerned with the loss of the $7 million, not the security of his new wife. That final confirmation was the last piece of the puzzle. Reese's love was a transaction. My disappearance was a strategic defense. My irrelevant competence had been the only shield strong enough to protect her. Sarah thanked Mr. Thompson, and her next action was completely unexpected. She didn't return to the apartment. She didn't call friends. She booked a commercial flight to London, a city I had often used as a financial hub. She knew I hadn't actually been on a cruise. She knew I was operating from a strategic base. She was tracing my steps, following the competent, invisible woman she had finally realized was her mother. I, Victoria, was tracking her. My digital security system, which I had left running on low-grade surveillance around my former home, flagged her absence and the sudden, frantic activity on Reese's phone. Reese was now fully aware that the Foundation Charter was exposed and that my letter was read. He was in a state of terminal panic, realizing that not only had he lost his fortune, but he had lost control of his wife's narrative. I saw the flight manifest. Vance, London, one way. My heart leaped. She wasn't running away from me. She was running to me, following the trail of competence I had laid down. I knew she was coming to London, which was the headquarters of the long-term treasury instrument I had created to house the Foundation's cash. It was the deepest part of the rabbit hole. I immediately contacted my small, trusted network in London and instructed them to book a specific, private suite for her under an alias, a discreet, comfortable haven near the financial district, far from any media scrutiny. I did not contact her directly. I needed her to find me on her own terms, to prove to herself that she could stand on her own 2 feet, free of both Reese's dependence and my enabling. When Sarah landed in London, She did exactly what a daughter of a financial strategist would do. She went to the only contact she knew, the international brokerage firm that handled the Villa Trust's overseas accounts. She presented her marriage certificate and the Villa deed, asking questions about the sudden restructuring of the ancillary portfolio. The manager, alerted by my preemptive call, informed her that the funds were securely located in a newly constituted, irrevocable instrument dedicated to her generational security, and that the only person with access to its governance was the founder, Victoria Vance. Sarah now knew where to go. She knew her mother was not on a ship. She was nearby, waiting for her to find the end of the strategic line. She checked into the private suite I had booked for her, an anonymous act of care that spoke louder than any phone call. The evening she arrived, she called my old, non-public office number, the one I had used for 2 decades for only the most confidential corporate work, the number Reese never knew existed. It rang in my command center in the apartment near the financial district, miles away from her. I picked up on the first ring, my voice steady, professional, and entirely devoid of the motherly emotion I felt swelling in my chest. "Vance Management," I answered. "Mom," Serafina said, and the sound of my name, stripped of the wedding stress and the veneer of her husband's demands, was the most beautiful music I had heard in months. "I'm in London. I saw the papers. I read your letter. I understand everything. I need to talk to you about the foundation." I smiled, a slow, quiet, profoundly strategic smile. Reese wanted me to disappear. I had disappeared into the very bedrock of her financial security, and now my daughter was finally coming home, not to the emotional warmth she had always depended on, but to the cold, hard wisdom I had spent a lifetime acquiring. The conversation was not about if she would leave Reese, but how she would use the strength I had given her to do it. The mother's work was finally complete. The strategist's work was about to begin. The conversation that followed Serafina's phone call was the most important of my life. It was not a reunion of mother and daughter, but a meeting between a corporate strategist, me, Victoria, and a traumatized but awakening principal, Sarah. I insisted on professional distance, telling her we would meet at a neutral, discreet location in the financial district the next morning. I wanted her to maintain the clarity and cold resolve she had found in my letter, free from the immediate flood of emotion that would have come with a tearful embrace. She needed to understand that her future was now a corporate restructuring. When we met, Sarah was pale but steady. She wore simple clothes, and her eyes held a new, hard intensity one recognized from my own younger self, the look of a woman who has just realized she has to fight for her survival. We didn't hug. We sat at a quiet corner table in a private dining club, surrounded by the murmur of high finance. "Tell me everything you know, Mom," Sarah started, skipping the emotional pleasantries. "Not about the money. About Reese." I nodded, satisfied with her directness. Reese didn't want the villa for its beauty or legacy. He wanted the liquidity, the $7 million, to inject into his firm's leveraged merger deal. His career trajectory was contingent on that capital. When he demanded my disappearance, he was removing the only person who understood the trust's protective mechanisms. He thought he was clearing the field for a simple asset grab. "And when you created the foundation," Sarah finished, her voice gaining strength, "you didn't just take away his money, you detonated his career." "I created a strategic vacuum," I confirmed. When the cash disappeared, he couldn't fund his part of the merger. His failure was public, humiliating, and irreversible in the short term. He had to withdraw, exposing him as a man who misrepresented his financial capacity to his most powerful network. "He is professionally ruined." Sarah took a deep, shaky breath, her composure wavering for the first time. "He blamed you, Mom. He called it revenge. He said the foundation was a cage, a way for you to control me." This was the crux of the emotional wound, and I addressed it head-on, not as a mother, but as a financial advisor. "He has to blame me, Sarah. To accept my action was protection, is to accept he is a predator. The foundation is a cage only if you define stability as a cage. It provides a guaranteed, tax-advantaged income stream for your entire life, and its principal is protected from all future debt, litigation, and, crucially, divorce claims. It's a self-sustaining asset. A cage is what Reese built for you, convincing you that your worth came from his status and his network, not from your own intrinsic, stable resources. Sarah absorbed this, and the realization was like a lightning bolt passing through her. She finally saw the cold, hard logic of my protective love. My disappearance had forced her to see her husband as a predator and me as her architect of safety. The tables had turned completely. We then shifted to the tactical phase, the divorce and the disappearance of the villa. The villa is the final liability, I explained. Reese is stuck with an illiquid, high-maintenance property he can't afford to keep and can't quickly sell for the price he needs. He is desperate. He has to sell it, Sarah mused. He needs cash immediately to cover his debts and save face. Precisely. He will try to pressure you to sign a quick sale, claiming the proceeds will be split. Do not sign anything, I warned her, my voice turning steely. The villa property is a joint asset of the marital estate. If he files for divorce first, he will try to leverage the property's value to claim part of the foundation's income or use it to negotiate a favorable settlement. We must control the narrative and the timing. I then outlined my final, irreversible strategic move, the one that would remove the final anchor connecting us to Reese and ensure Sarah's complete, non-negotiable freedom. Here is what you must do, Sarah. You must be the one to file for divorce, and you must do it on the grounds of financial misrepresentation and emotional duress, citing his demand for my banishment as proof of his transactional view of the marriage. Sarah looked surprised. But I don't have proof of the demand, Mom. Only his confession when he was angry. But you do, I said, producing a large, unmarked manila envelope from my briefcase. I knew Reese would try to use his position to tamper with the trust while I was gone. So, I executed a final audit log print of all trust activities on the morning of the wedding, before the marriage was finalized. This log contains every single inquiry Reese made into the trust's financial structure in the week leading up to the ceremony, using untraceable, non-corporate IPs, the frantic, desperate searches he made for the cash reserve. I slid the envelope across the table. It was heavy, filled with printed documents. This audit log proves he was aggressively seeking the cash reserve and attempting to undermine the trust while professing his love and after demanding my banishment. It shows his single-minded pursuit of the liquidity, not the legacy. This is irrefutable evidence of premeditation and financial deceit. Mr. Thompson, armed with this audit log and the foundation charter, can file the divorce petition by the end of the week. Sarah stared at the envelope, her face now completely transformed from pain to empowerment. This was the true gift, the gift of truth, delivered with unassailable evidence. I then unveiled the final, perfect stroke of my disappearance. And the villa? Reese wants to sell it quickly. We will let him sell it. Sarah looked confused. But if he sells it, he gets half the proceeds. He thinks he gets half. But Robert and I installed a final, unique protective clause when we established the trust 30 years ago, a clause that sits outside the standard deed but is legally registered in the French jurisdiction. It is called the Vance Restoration Guarantee. It states that if the villa is sold within 5 years of the final trust transfer, a proportional percentage of the final sale price, equivalent to the full, verified cost of the initial 2-year restoration and ongoing maintenance reserve, must be immediately remitted to the initial trustee, me, to cover the historical, capital-intensive upkeep. This money is legally categorized as a reimbursement of family capital investment, not as part of the marital estate. Sarah's jaw dropped. How much is that clause worth? I leaned forward, my voice a confident whisper. Based on the recent sale appraisals and the accumulated maintenance logs, that reimbursement clause is worth exactly 95% of the current market value of the villa property. Reese will be left with the remaining 5%, a pittance that won't even cover his legal fees. He'll execute the sale, thinking he's getting a massive payout, and then the money will vanish again, legally reimbursed to me, and then immediately deposited into the foundation for your long-term benefit. Sarah finally smiled, a genuinely bright, relieved smile. She stood up, not to leave, but to embrace me. The hug was tight, long overdue, and filled with a profound understanding. "You didn't just disappear, Mom," she murmured into my shoulder. "You restructured the world around me." I held her close, feeling the warmth of my daughter, finally choosing confidence over illusion. "The greatest gift was my absence, Sarah. It forced Reese to reveal himself, and it forced you to find your own strength. Now let's go home and file the papers." The strategy was complete. The divorce would be filed immediately, catching Reese completely off guard while he was still dealing with the fallout of the failed merger. He would attempt to sell the villa for quick cash, believing he had one last asset to recover, only to discover the entire sale price would vanish into the Vance restoration guarantee I had set up decades ago. Reese had demanded my absence, and in that absence, I had removed his reputation, his capital, his wife, and his final asset. His ruin was now complete and legal. The days following our meeting in London were characterized by the final, surgical execution of my strategy. Serafina and I returned to my secure apartment in the financial district, my true home, now, where we worked meticulously with Mr. Thompson. Sarah was no longer a distressed bride. She was an empowered client, reviewing the audit logs and discussing legal angles with a clarity that made my heart swell with pride. The emotional weight of the betrayal had been replaced by the cold, necessary focus on the future. We filed the divorce petition immediately, catching Reese completely off guard. The grounds were precise and professionally devastating: abandonment, emotional duress, and financial fraud/misrepresentation, citing his use of marital assets as leverage for a personal business deal and the concealment of his motives for my banishment. Mr. Thompson attached the final audit log print as Exhibit A, the irrefutable evidence of Reese's frantic, secretive probes into the Villa Trust, proving his intent to defraud the trust and exploit its liquidity. Reese's reaction was exactly as I predicted: terminal, desperate panic. He was already reeling from the public humiliation of the failed merger deal, and now, the divorce petition was a second, massive strike that threatened to expose the full extent of his deceit to his entire social and professional network. He tried everything. He called Sarah relentlessly, vacillating between rage and pathetic pleas for reconciliation, promising to somehow restore the $7 million if she would only withdraw the petition. Sarah handled him with calm, distant professionalism, directing all communication through Mr. Thompson. The pressure forced Reese's final, predictable move. He decided to liquidate his biggest remaining asset to save his reputation. He would sell the villa to generate immediate cash, hoping to pay off his immediate debts and salvage some remnant of capital before the divorce finalized. He saw the sale as his last chance to escape the financial ruin I had meticulously engineered. I allowed him to initiate the sale process. I even instructed Mr. Thompson to cooperate smoothly on the surface, ensuring Reese believed he had secured a quick, discreet buyer, a private equity fund that specialized in European luxury real estate. The sale price was negotiated swiftly, a massive, 8-figure sum that, on paper, should have solved all his problems and given him millions in profit after the mortgage was paid. Reese was ecstatic, convinced he had outmaneuvered the old woman one last time by selling the illiquid property before the divorce could complicate the split. The day of the closing, 1 month after the wedding, was the final, devastating climax. Reese arrived at the London law offices with his own frantic, overpaid legal team. He was smug, impatient, and ready to walk away with a massive check. Sarah, who had to be present as a co-owner of the marital asset, was there with Mr. Thompson, composed and entirely silent. The closing went smoothly. The buyer's funds were wired, the final papers were signed, and Reese watched his massive, final payout, a check for the full profit amount, being prepared. This was his moment of salvation. Then Mr. Thompson spoke, his voice polite and utterly lethal. "Mr. Sterling, before the funds are dispersed, we must address the final remaining legal contingency, the Vance Restoration Guarantee Clause, active upon the sale of the villa within 5 years of the trust's transfer, as registered in the French jurisdiction." Reese looked baffled. "The what?
What are you talking about?"
"There is no such clause in the deed we signed. The clause, as a historical condition of the trust's original formation, is not contained within the recent transfer deed, which only covers the property itself," I interjected, speaking for the first time in his presence since I walked away from the bridal shower. I had accompanied Sarah, sitting quietly until this moment, now stepping forward to stand beside my daughter. My appearance was the final, physical delivery of the strategic vacuum. Reese went white. He stared at me, the woman he had banished, the woman he had dismissed as irrelevant, suddenly manifesting in the middle of his final victory, armed with a legal clause he had never known existed. "Victoria," he gasped, his voice cracking. You were supposed to be on a cruise." "I was," I replied, my voice calm and devastatingly factual. "I was cruising through your financial filings. The Vance Restoration Guarantee requires that upon a rapid sale, a proportional percentage of the proceeds, equivalent to the historical capital investment and maintenance reserve, must be legally reimbursed to the initial trustee, myself, before any remaining profit is distributed to the marital estate." His lawyers immediately protested, scrambling to find the clause, but it was too late. The clause was legal, registered internationally, and specifically designed by Robert and me decades ago to prevent a short-term, predatory asset flip. It was the ultimate hidden poison pill. Mr. Thompson handed Reese's team the official legal computation. The amount calculated for reimbursement to the trustee, me, Victoria, was 95.2% of the net sale profit, the exact value of the illiquid cash reserve and the long-term maintenance costs that Reese had planned to avoid. The figure was precise, irrefutable, and absolute. The look on Reese's face was total annihilation. He had sold the most valuable asset he would ever touch, believing it would save him, only to have the entire fund legally vanish into my hands. "The funds have been wired, Mr. Sterling," Mr. Thompson announced, confirming the finality of the transaction. "The 95.2% reimbursement has already been transferred to Mrs. Vance's account, and the remaining 4.8%, your share of the joint profit, will be deposited into the marital account tomorrow." Reese was left with a pittance, a figure that wouldn't cover the London lawyer's fees for the day, let alone his mountainous debts. His entire high-stakes game had resulted in a loss of his reputation, his wife, and his entire fortune, all delivered by the woman he told to disappear. I looked at Reese, not with anger, but with a cold, assessing pity one reserves for a broken instrument. "Reese, I told you your wish was my command. You wanted me to disappear, and I disappeared the asset you cared most about. The money has been deposited directly into the Serafina Vance Foundation for financial security. It is safe now, entirely out of your reach, dedicated solely to my daughter's future." I placed a single, sealed envelope on the closing table. It contained a simple note, irrelevant. Then I turned and walked out of the room, Serafina's hand firmly in mine. She walked with a new strength, her spine straight, fully detached from the wreckage of her former life. We left Reese behind, a ruined man, sitting in a sterile London office, contemplating the total loss of his marriage, his career, and his fortune, all because he underestimated the quiet competence and strategic rage of an irrelevant mother. The game was over. The wisdom of competence had triumphed over the wound of betrayal. The storm passed quickly, leaving behind a profound, cleansing stillness. Serafina and I didn't return to the United States immediately. Instead, we spent the next few weeks in London, managing the final legal cleanup and, more importantly, focusing on Serafina's emotional and professional recovery. The total, swift collapse of Reese's life, his divorce, his professional disgrace, and the public revelation of his financial desperation was now documented history in the financial press, a cautionary tale about over-leveraging and underestimating one's in-laws. Reese, stripped of his capital and his connections, vanished from the elite circles as quickly as he had ascended. The 4.8% of the villa sale he retained was immediately consumed by his legal fees and mounting personal debts. He was professionally finished, forced to take a drastically lower status job at a minor firm, his reputation permanently damaged by the whispered story of the irrelevant widow who had engineered his total ruin. He was no longer a threat. He was a ghost of his former arrogance. The real work was now with Serafina, She was raw, bruised by the betrayal, but fundamentally free. Her dependency on Reese's status, and before that on my enabling protection, was gone. The shock of realizing that the mother she often viewed as antiquated was, in fact, the sharpest financial mind she knew, had profoundly shifted her perception of me and, crucially, of herself. Our time in London became a private, intensive course in financial autonomy. I took her into the headquarters of the Serafina Vance Foundation for Financial Security, the fortress I had built. The foundation was now robust, secured by the combined capital of the original trust reserve and the reimbursement from the villa sale. I didn't just hand her the keys. I sat her down and taught her how to build the lock. The greatest mistake a woman can make, Sarah, I told her one evening, over documents spread across my apartment's dining table, is to outsource her own competence. Reese never saw me. He saw an aging mother. He missed the financial architect. You must never let anyone define your value based on their narrow need. Your worth is in your competence. I taught her about the foundation's governance, walking her through the principles of long-term treasury management, low-risk portfolio allocation, and tax-advantaged income streams. She grasped the concepts quickly, realizing that the foundation was not a passive inheritance, but an active tool for her future stability. She understood that while the principal was untouchable, the steady income it generated gave her the freedom to pursue a career based on passion, not necessity. Sarah made her first pivotal decision. She decided to return to her original passion, urban planning, which she had abandoned under Reese's pressure because it wasn't considered elite enough. She enrolled in a specialized master's program, using the foundation's income not for lavish consumption, but for practical education and self-investment. The money was now a quiet support system, not a loud statement of status. The final, symbolic act of our journey from wound to wisdom occurred 6 months after the wedding, precisely when Reese had commanded I should reappear from my cruise. Sarah and I were having lunch in a quiet cafe near her new university campus. She was relaxed, genuinely happy, and excited about her studies. Her phone buzzed. It was an unfamiliar number. "It's Reese," she said simply, seeing the city code. She didn't look anxious or angry. She looked distant. I smiled, my old, strategic smile returning. "Answer it. It's time to close the final file." Sarah put the phone on speaker, holding it loosely. "Serafina?" "You picked up." Reese's voice was thin, tired, and laced with desperation. "Look, the 6 months are up. I know you filed, I know about the foundation, and I know you were behind that damn reimbursement clause. You ruined me, Victoria. You and that irrelevant old woman. I need to talk about settling the remaining debts, and I need to know what she wants now." Sarah looked at me, and I gave her a small, definitive nod. This was her closing statement. "Reese," Sarah replied, her voice steady and clear, carrying the precise, professional tone I had used in the conservatory. "You are speaking to Serafina Vance, the sole beneficiary and co-governor of the foundation. I am not settling any debts related to your personal capital failure. The foundation is secure and protected from your claims. And as for my mother, Victoria," she paused, taking a breath that was now filled with the profound strength of her own competence. "You said her greatest gift was her disappearance," Sarah concluded, her words hitting him with the finality of a gavel. "You were correct. My mother disappeared into the financial security she built for me, and in doing so, she forced your own true character to appear. I never want to see that character again. The conversation is over." She hung up, a look of profound, quiet peace settling on her face. The call wasn't about revenge. It was about defining her boundaries and acknowledging the immense, strategic love I had demonstrated. The wound was healed, replaced by the wisdom of autonomy. The story was over for Reese, but for Serafina, it was a new beginning. She was now the master of her own fortune and the architect of her own life, permanently shielded by the financial fortress built by the woman the world and her ex-husband had dismissed as irrelevant. I, Victoria, finally stepped back, not out of banishment, but out of the profound satisfaction that my final, strategic act had not only protected my daughter, but had empowered her to become her own most formidable defender. My greatest gift was complete. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to subscribe to Voice of Jenna so you never miss the next chapter in our world of twists, lessons, and unforgettable moments. Your support means the world to me, and trust me, the stories only get better from here.